Hello everyone, and welcome back to Gone Legends. In today's video, we will be honoring American celebrities who sadly passed away today and over the last few days, as well as notable figures from around the world whose loss has touched many. Before we begin, we would truly appreciate your support. Please take a moment to like this video. Your kindness helps us continue sharing the news. Thank you. And now, let us start.
Claudette Colvin. Claudette Colvin was born in 1939 in Montgomery, Alabama, into a world defined by segregation and silence imposed on Black Americans. Growing up in a working-class family during the harshest years of Jim Crow, she learned injustice not from history books but from everyday life. At school, she studied Black history and the stories of Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth, lessons that planted courage deep inside her long before she knew she would need it. On March 2, 1955, at just 15 years old, Claudette boarded a segregated bus after school. When the driver ordered her to give up her seat to a white passenger, she refused. She later said it felt as though history itself was pressing her down, telling her to stay. Police dragged her from the bus, handcuffed her, and arrested her, charging her with multiple offenses that could have ruined her life. Months later, Rosa Parks would become the face of the bus boycott, while Claudette's name was pushed aside. Civil rights leaders feared her youth, darker complexion, and later her pregnancy would be used to discredit the movement. Yet her testimony became vital in Browder v. Gale, the Supreme Court case that ultimately ended bus segregation. Claudette lived most of her life outside the spotlight, working as a nurse's aide and raising her family, while history often forgot her name. But her courage helped change America. Her legacy is not fame, but truth. She stood when the world told her to sit, and because of her, millions would one day sit wherever they chose. Kiana Underwood. Kiana Underwood was born in 1988 into a generation shaped by digital connection and boundless possibility. From a young age, she radiated warmth. Friends remember her laughter, her kindness, and her ability to make people feel seen. She was creative, emotionally intelligent, and deeply expressive, using social media not as a performance, but as a reflection of her authentic self. As her online presence grew, so did her impact. Kiana shared her life openly, her struggles, her healing, her vulnerability. In a world often filtered and perfected, her honesty resonated deeply. She spoke about mental health and self-worth, becoming a source of comfort for people fighting battles they rarely spoke about. Her life was tragically cut short, leaving a profound silence behind. While details of her passing were kept private, the grief felt by her community spoke volumes. Kiana left behind more than posts or followers. She left connection, reassurance, and the reminder that kindness can save lives. Her legacy lives on in the people who felt less alone because she existed. Danielle Scott Houghton. Danielle Scott Houghton was born in the late 1980s and became a powerful creative force behind the scenes of British television. Though not widely known to the public, she was deeply respected within the industry as a BBC drama executive, helping shape acclaimed projects connected to Peaky Blinders and other major productions. Those who worked with Danielle describe her as brilliant, generous, and fiercely supportive. She didn't just develop stories, she nurtured people. She had a rare gift for recognizing talent, uplifting new voices, and making others feel valued and heard. Her kindness matched her creative vision. In 2024, Danielle died unexpectedly in her sleep in her 30s. Her death sent shockwaves through the industry. Tributes poured in describing not only her professional brilliance, but her humanity. Danielle's legacy lives on in the stories she helped bring to life and the people she inspired. She reminded the world that true impact doesn't always happen in front of the camera. Sometimes it happens quietly, changing everything. Andy Friendly. Andy Friendly was born in 1951 into a family already connected to the world of media and storytelling. The son of legendary CBS newsman Fred Friendly, Andy grew up surrounded by journalism, integrity, and the power of television to inform and entertain. Yet Andy carved his own path. He became the first producer of Entertainment Tonight, helping to create what would become one of the most influential entertainment news programs in history. Andy Friendly was more than a producer. He was a visionary. He understood how to connect audiences to stories, how to humanize celebrities, and how to bring warmth into a rapidly changing media landscape. Beyond Entertainment Tonight, he served as a programming executive at NBC and King World, shaping television for decades. He was known for spotting talent early, mentoring young creatives, and leading with generosity rather than ego. Born on November 6, 1951, Andy lived a life deeply woven into the fabric of American television. He earned Emmy recognition, taught future filmmakers at USC, and served as president of the Hollywood Radio and Television Society. Yet those closest to him remember not the accolades, but the man, his humor, his kindness, his ability to make people feel important. Andy Friendly passed away in 2024 at the age of 74. His death marked the end of an era. Tributes described him as a leader with heart, a storyteller who understood that television was ultimately about people. Andy's legacy is visible every time entertainment news feels human, every time a young creative is given a chance, every time leadership is guided by empathy instead of power. Julia Roberts. Julia Roberts was born on October 28, 1967, in Smyrna, Georgia, far from red carpets and flashing cameras. She entered the world quietly into a family that lived on the fragile edge between art and survival. Her parents, Betty Lou Bredemus and Walter Grady Roberts, were actors, playwrights, and dreamers who believed in storytelling even when it didn't pay the bills. They ran a small children's acting workshop, teaching creativity not as a luxury, but as a necessity. From the very beginning, Julia was surrounded by imagination, but also instability. Her childhood was shaped by absence long before fame ever arrived. When she was just 4 years old, her parents divorced, and the safety of a united home dissolved into something uncertain. Years later, when Julia was only 10, her father died of cancer. That loss left a quiet scar, one that never fully healed. It introduced her early to grief, to impermanence, to the understanding that love could disappear without warning. That emotional awareness would later become one of her greatest strengths as an actress, though at the time it was simply pain. Growing up, Julia didn't see herself as special. She was tall, self-conscious, unsure of where she fit. She dreamed of becoming a veterinarian, not a movie star. Hollywood was an abstract concept, something that happened to other people. But fate has a way of guiding people even when they don't recognize the direction at first. Her older brother, Eric Roberts, was already pursuing acting, slowly carving out his own career. Watching him opened a door Julia hadn't realized was there. After graduating high school, Julia moved to New York City, carrying hope wrapped in uncertainty. The city was overwhelming. Auditions were brutal. Rejection was constant. She took classes, worked small jobs, and waited for months. Then years. There were no guarantees, just persistence. What she had, though she didn't yet understand it, was presence, a quality that couldn't be taught. When Julia entered a room, people noticed, not because she demanded attention, but because she felt real. Her early roles were modest, but they mattered. In 1988, Mystic Pizza introduced her to audiences as Daisy Arujo, a young woman restless with ambition and vulnerability. The film was intimate, grounded, human. Julia didn't perform the role. She inhabited it. Viewers recognized something honest in her, something familiar. It wasn't glamour, it was relatability. For the first time, Hollywood leaned in. Then came the moment that changed everything. In 1990, Julia Roberts stepped into the role of Vivian Ward in Pretty Woman. The script was simple on the surface, a love story, a fantasy. But Julia transformed it into something deeper. She gave Vivian dignity, humor, self-respect, and emotional truth. Her laugh was unguarded, her smile was luminous, her vulnerability disarming. Audiences didn't just watch Pretty Woman. They felt it. And overnight, Julia Roberts became a global phenomenon. Fame arrived like a tidal wave. Magazine covers, interviews, expectations. At 22 years old, she was crowned America's sweetheart, a label both flattering and suffocating. The world wanted her to stay exactly as she was, frozen in youth and charm. But Julia was evolving, and evolution is rarely comfortable in the public eye. Her private life became a spectacle. Relationships were scrutinized, every move analyzed. The pressure to perform perfection was relentless. Behind the smile, there were moments of isolation, confusion, and exhaustion. Julia once said that fame felt like being swallowed alive. And yet, she kept working, not to escape, but to express. She chose roles that challenged her image, which was Nized an Image. Sleeping with the Enemy revealed a woman navigating fear and survival. The Pelican Brief showcased intelligence and moral conviction. My Best Friend's Wedding allowed her to be flawed, jealous, human. Each performance chipped away at the idea that she was simply a romantic fantasy. She was proving, again and again, that she was an actress of depth. As the 1990s unfolded, Julia Roberts became one of the highest-paid women in Hollywood. But success did not silence self-doubt. There were pauses in her career, intentional retreats from the spotlight. She needed space to breathe, to recalibrate, to remember who she was without an audience watching. Then came Erin Brockovich. Released in 2000, the film demanded everything Julia had. She played a single mother, outspoken, relentless, fighting corporate corruption with nothing but grit and courage. The performance was raw, fearless, and electric. Julia disappeared into the role. When she won the Academy Award for Best Actress, it felt earned not just for that performance, but for the journey that led there. It was the moment she transcended celebrity and became legacy. But life does not stop at awards. In the years that followed, Julia chose balance over dominance. She became a mother, welcoming twins Hazel and Phineas in 2004, and later her son Henry. Motherhood shifted her axis entirely. Fame faded in importance. Time became precious, privacy sacred. She stepped back, not because she was finished, but because she was growing. Her later roles reflected that growth. August, Osage County exposed emotional fractures with brutal honesty. Eat, Pray, Love resonated with women searching for meaning beyond expectation. Julia wasn't chasing trends. She was telling stories that mirrored real life, including her own. Beyond the screen, she embraced quiet activism, environmental causes, children's health, education. She used her voice carefully, intentionally, never loudly, but always sincerely. That restraint became part of her power. Julia Roberts aged in public without apology. She resisted the pressure to erase time from her face. Instead, she allowed life to show. Lines became stories, experience became beauty. In doing so, she challenged an industry that fears aging, especially in women. What makes Julia Roberts a legend is not just her body of work, it is her humanity. The way she allowed herself to be imperfect, the way she stepped away when she needed to, the way she returned on her own terms. She taught the world that longevity is not about staying young, but about staying true. Her smile still carries warmth. Her silence still holds weight. Her presence still feels like home to generations who grew up watching her films. Julia Fiona Roberts is not just a star, she is a chapter in cinematic history written with heart. On Gone Legends, we honor lives that leave echoes. Julia Roberts' story continues, but her legacy is already eternal. Fame has a way of changing the temperature of a room. It grows louder, brighter, more demanding. And for Julia Roberts, the years following her Academy Award win were not a victory lap, but a reckoning. Success had elevated her to the highest peak Hollywood could offer, but standing at the top came with isolation. Applause fades quickly when you are alone with your thoughts, when the weight of expectation presses heavier than any trophy could ever feel. In the early 2000s, Julia stood at a crossroads that many actors never survive. She could chase dominance, remain omnipresent, accept every script, every paycheck, every headline, or she could step back, listen to the quieter voice inside her, the one that had been speaking since childhood, reminding her that life was fragile, that love mattered more than visibility. Julia chose the harder path. She chose restraint. Studios worried. Audiences wondered where America's sweetheart had gone. But Julia was learning something essential. She was learning how to live without performing. The girl who once feared being unseen now feared losing herself. Fame had taught her how easily identity could be swallowed whole. When Julia married cinematographer Danny Moder in 2002, it marked a turning point not only in her personal life, but in her understanding of intimacy. Their relationship was not built for spectacle, it was built for privacy, for shared silence, for the kind of love that doesn't need validation. In an industry where relationships are often consumed by the public, Julia guarded hers fiercely. That protection would later extend to her children, whom she shielded from the glare of cameras with almost militant devotion. Motherhood did not soften Julia Roberts, it deepened her. It gave her gravity. When she held her newborn twins for the first time in 2004, something shifted permanently. The urgency of fame dissolved. The need to prove anything disappeared. The world became smaller, more intimate. Every decision now passed through a different filter. Not, will this succeed, but will this matter? Her career entered a quieter phase, but never an empty one. Films like Closer allowed Julia to explore emotional complexity without glamour. She played women who were messy, guarded, wounded, roles that reflected the truth of adult relationships rather than fairy tales. The industry noticed that something had changed. Julia Roberts was no longer chasing relatability. She was embodying reality. Then came Eat, Pray, Love in 2010, a film that divided critics but deeply resonated with audiences. Julia portrayed a woman who walked away from a life that looked perfect on paper yet felt hollow inside. The story mirrored conversations women were having privately but rarely saw reflected on screen. Julia didn't play the role with youthful restlessness. She played it with exhaustion, with quiet bravery, with the weight of lived experience. For millions, the film wasn't escapism, it was permission. As the years passed, Julia's relationship with Hollywood evolved into something rare: mutual respect. She no longer needed the industry's approval, and the industry could no longer deny her relevance. When she appeared, it felt intentional, purposeful. Her performances in films like August, Osage County revealed an actress unafraid of emotional ugliness. Her portrayal of Barbara Weston was raw, confrontational, and deeply uncomfortable. It was a reminder that Julia Roberts could still command a room not with charm, but with truth. But beyond the performances, there was something else unfolding quietly. Julia Roberts was becoming a symbol of resistance in an industry obsessed with eternal youth. She refused to erase herself. She didn't chase the illusion of being 25 forever. She aged, publicly, honestly. Her face changed as all faces do, and instead of hiding it, she embraced it. In doing so, she challenged Hollywood's most deeply ingrained fear. This choice was not without consequence. Roles became fewer. Headlines shifted. But Julia did not retreat. She stood firm. She showed that aging was not failure, it was survival, it was evolution. It was evidence of a life lived fully. Off-screen, she continued her humanitarian work quietly, without branding or spectacle. She spoke about environmental sustainability, children's health, education. She used her influence sparingly, intentionally. Julia understood that real impact often happens far from applause. As her children grew, Julia found herself balancing motherhood with legacy. She wasn't just raising kids, she was raising humans in a world that already knew her name. Protecting their normalcy became her greatest act of rebellion. She walked them to school, cooked meals, lived simply. Fame became something she carried, not something she chased. In recent years, Julia Roberts has stepped into roles that reflect wisdom rather than ambition. Television series like Homecoming allowed her to explore long-form storytelling, slower, darker, more introspective. Her performances now breathe differently. They linger. They ask questions instead of answering them. Looking back, it becomes clear that Julia Roberts' story was never about domination. It was about endurance, about navigating an industry that builds idols and destroys them just as quickly, about choosing selfhood over spectacle, about understanding when to step forward and when to step away. She is still here, still evolving, still choosing carefully, and perhaps that is what makes her a true legend. Not the films alone, not the awards, but the courage to grow without apology, to age without erasure, to live without constant performance. Julia Fiona Roberts didn't just survive Hollywood. She redefined how to exist within it. She showed the world that softness can coexist with strength, that warmth can carry power, that a smile can be both invitation and boundary. On Gone Legends, we honor stories that endure beyond headlines. Julia Roberts' legacy is not frozen in time. It is alive, breathing, evolving, written not only in film reels but in the emotional memory of generations who saw themselves reflected in her work. She is not gone, but she is, undeniably, a legend. There comes a moment in every legend's life when the world stops asking what they will become and begins asking what they have meant. For Julia Roberts, that moment did not arrive with an award, or a box office milestone, or a headline declaring her reign. It arrived quietly, almost invisibly, in the way her absence was felt more deeply than her presence. When she stepped away, the space she left behind revealed just how profoundly she had shaped the emotional language of modern cinema. Julia Roberts did not invent the romantic lead, nor did she redefine drama on her own. What she did was far subtler and far more lasting. She gave audiences permission to feel without irony. In an age increasingly dominated by spectacle, cynicism, and emotional distance, Julia's performances insisted on sincerity. She cried without embarrassment. She laughed without restraint. She loved without calculation. And because of that, people trusted her. Trust is the rarest currency in Hollywood. As the years passed, younger actresses emerged, each compared to her in some way. The industry searched endlessly for the next Julia Roberts, as if her presence could be replicated by charm alone. But what they failed to understand was that Julia's power was never about perfection. It was about contradiction. She was glamorous but awkward, confident but self-questioning, warm yet guarded. These contradictions made her human, and humanity is not something that can be manufactured. Behind the scenes, Julia became a quiet reference point for an entire generation of performers. Not through loud mentorship or public manifestos, but through example. She demonstrated that it was possible to step back without disappearing, to say no without punishment, to choose family without forfeiting relevance. Many actresses who followed would cite her not as an idol, but as a blueprint for survival. The emotional cost of fame, which Julia rarely discussed publicly, became clearer with time. The constant observation, the erosion of privacy, the sense that one's image belonged to everyone but oneself. Julia learned early that fame does not ask permission. It takes, and if you do not protect yourself, it will take everything. Her retreats from the spotlight were not signs of fragility. They were acts of self-preservation. When she returned to acting after long pauses, there was a noticeable difference. Her performances carried stillness, a deeper listening. She no longer rushed scenes. She allowed silence to speak. This evolution mirrored her personal journey. The young woman who once filled every space with laughter had grown into someone who understood the power of restraint. In Homecoming, her portrayal of Heidi Birdman was subdued, almost haunting. The performance was internal, psychological, restrained. It was a reminder that Julia Roberts did not need grand gestures to command attention. She could hold an audience with a glance, with hesitation, with what remained unsaid. It was acting stripped of ornament, grounded in experience. As Julia moved further into the later chapters of her life, her relationship with success transformed completely. She no longer measured it in accolades or earnings. Success became balance, integrity, the ability to wake up without dread, to choose projects that resonated rather than demanded, to walk away when something felt wrong. Hollywood, slowly and reluctantly, began to adapt around her. Studios realized that audiences still wanted to see Julia Roberts, not as a memory, but as a presence shaped by time. Her continued relevance challenged the industry's assumptions about age, especially for women. She proved that maturity did not diminish appeal, it deepened it. Yet even legends carry doubt. Julia has spoken in rare moments of openness about insecurity, about questioning her worth, about the fear of becoming invisible. These confessions mattered because they dismantled the myth of invincibility. They reminded the world that even those who seem untouchable wrestle with the same uncertainties as everyone else. Fame does not cure fear, it amplifies it. What grounded Julia through these years was not applause, but connection, her family, her long marriage, her children growing into their own identities away from the noise of celebrity culture. She built a life that did not revolve around being seen, but around being present. That choice may never trend, but it endures. There is a quiet poetry in the way Julia Roberts exists today. She does not chase relevance, she allows it to come to her. She does not explain herself, she lives. In a culture obsessed with constant performance, her refusal to overexpose feels radical. Looking back across her body of work, one truth becomes clear. Julia Roberts didn't just play women searching for love, meaning, or belonging. She lived those searches in real time, under a microscope, and emerged intact. Her career is not a straight line upward. It is a landscape, filled with peaks and valleys, pauses and returns, mistakes and reinventions. That is why her story resonates so deeply. It mirrors real life. On Gone Legends, we do not measure greatness by how loudly someone shined, but by how long their light continues to guide others. Julia Roberts' influence is everywhere. In performances that prioritize emotional honesty, in actresses who choose longevity over burnout, in audiences who still believe that sincerity belongs on screen. She taught us that joy can be serious, that beauty can be imperfect, that strength can be gentle, and that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is step back and live. Julia Fiona Roberts remains with us, still writing her story, still evolving beyond expectation. But her legacy is already woven into the emotional history of cinema. not as a symbol of fantasy, but as a testament to authenticity. She is not gone. She does not need to be mourned. She is a living legend, and some legends don't fade. They simply grow quieter, deeper, and more meaningful with time. Time has a way of revealing what noise tries to hide. When the echoes of applause fade, when the headlines stop scrolling, when the world moves on to its next obsession, what remains is truth. And the truth of Julia Roberts is not found in box office numbers or award shelves. It is found in memory, in feeling, in the quiet way her presence still lingers long after the screen goes dark. There is something profoundly rare about a person who knows when to speak and when to remain silent. Julia Roberts learned that lesson not from triumph, but from endurance, from being watched too closely for too long, from understanding that mystery is not distance but protection. In stepping back, she did not disappear, she became more herself. As the years passed, Julia no longer needed to announce her importance. It was already understood. Her name alone carried weight, not because it promised spectacle, but because it promised sincerity. Audiences trusted her. They trusted that whatever she chose to do would come from a place of intention, not obligation. That trust is not easily earned, and once lost, rarely returned. Julia never lost it. In interviews, she often speaks with humility, almost disbelief, at the arc of her own life. The girl from Georgia who once felt awkward in her own skin became a woman whose image was projected across the world, and yet she never fully identified with that image. Fame, to Julia, was something external, a circumstance, not an identity. This separation may be the very reason she survived it. She watched the industry change around her, the rise of digital fame, the erosion of privacy, the acceleration of careers that burn bright and vanish quickly. Through it all, Julia remained anchored in something older, something slower: craft, presence, emotional truth. She never chased virality. She chased connection. There were moments when Hollywood no longer knew where to place her. She didn't fit neatly into categories designed for youth or novelty. And so, for a time, she existed between spaces, not forgotten, but not constantly visible. And in that space, she lived, fully, privately, freely. Her children grew, her marriage endured. Her life expanded beyond the frame. She cooked dinners, she missed events, she chose mornings without makeup over nights under spotlights. These choices, invisible to the world, were perhaps her greatest triumphs because they were hers alone. And yet, when Julia Roberts does return to the screen, there is a stillness to her now that commands attention in a different way. She no longer needs to fill silence. She understands it. She lets it breathe. Her performances feel lived in, textured by time, layered with understanding that only experience can bring. Watching her now is like listening to a familiar voice that has learned new depths. There is no urgency in her presence anymore, no hunger for validation, just confidence earned the long way, through doubt, through retreat, through reflection. She has become what so many chase, but few achieve: contentment. Julia Roberts did not conquer Hollywood. She outlasted it. She showed that success does not have to mean constant visibility, that stepping away is not failure, that evolution does not require explanation. In doing so, she quietly rewrote the rules, especially for women who came after her. She made room for longevity, for complexity, for grace. When future generations look back, they will not remember Julia Roberts as just the woman with the famous smile. They will remember her as the woman who brought emotional honesty to mainstream cinema, who made vulnerability powerful, who taught audiences that love stories could be grounded in dignity and that strength could exist without hardness. Her legacy is not loud. It doesn't demand attention. It waits patiently in the background, resurfacing whenever someone presses play on an old film and feels something stir. Whenever a performance feels real instead of manufactured. Whenever an actress chooses authenticity over perfection. On Gone Legends, we tell stories that don't end with loss, but with understanding. Julia Roberts' story reminds us that legends are not defined by how brightly they shine at one moment in time, but by how deeply they continue to resonate long after the noise fades. She is still here, still choosing, still living. And perhaps that is the most powerful ending of all. Because some legends don't leave us, they simply teach us how to stay.